think it is very important that players take more responsibility for the ecosystem. I think that it's very important to just like kind of come up with own ideas. There's so much information to be picked up. That's the pitfall where the absolute majority of poker players are stuck in. You know, you need to make X money. And the one thing I've learned is there's always more to it.
Hey, Fedor, thanks for jumping on the call and congrats on your recent Triton win. That was a fun one.
Thanks. Appreciate it. Yeah. First tournament seems to be my lucky one.
I like that, setting the tone for the year, right?
Yeah, it's nice. I won the first tournament in, I think, London as well. And okay. It's nice, like for a Triton series, and it's nice because you're not going to be losing on the trip. So
okay, you're putting your mental state in the right, and it's also good. It is like super high roller event, not a small one. So as you say, you sort of set, right?
Yeah, I mean the buy-ins get pretty high. I play almost $1 million buy-ins throughout a Triton series, so it's nice to get some.
Yeah, you guys play pretty crazy games there, that's for sure. Well, that brings us to like sort of first question of how much you actually play these days. Like I'm just wondering how that looks in your schedule.
Yeah, mostly Tritons.
Also, like not concentrating on the few biggest events that are going on.
Yeah, basically. So I'm not eager to travel to Vegas too much. So I play Tritons, which are 4 trips a year. Then I probably go to WSOP once a year. I did the Bahamas trip for the GG or the WSOP thing in the Bahamas in December. And then went to Vegas afterwards, and I played 1 EPT. So I would say like 6, 7 live trips a year, and then the occasional Sunday. Okay,
so like, it's probably far from like full grind schedule, right, that you used to have back in the days. But like, it's really interesting for me, like, how do you keep like on top of your game if you do not play like all the time? Like it's not probably the main thing that you do right now, but you still have to probably study to be sharp in these biggest games. Like how do you approach that? Like what motivates you to keep if you only play a few times per year?
Yeah, that's a good question. I actually don't really study a lot right now, and I think that actually a lot of my EV in those games comes from just being sharp when I play.
Okay.
Like I think that there's so much information to be picked up, and also player specific information. Obviously my win rate would increase if I would spend more time between the stops and just more time in general. But I actually feel like I'm doing really well in these fields right now, and I feel very confident, more confident than in a long time. So I think it's weird, but like I think if I'm just very much present and like I'm really in tune with the game and my opponents, like I think I'm doing very good in these fields.
It does sound weird though. That being said, yeah. So you think, where is that edge comes from? Like,
I mean, I think that there's so much room for deviations that like I would say my short stack game is very strong, and I did invest quite some time in diving deeper into payout specific plays, so studying ICM, but also coming up with my own ideas. And I think that ICM is not really a great representation for how to play optimally there. So I think that it's very important to just like kind of come up with own ideas. And I think once you understand the mechanics, like once you understand that it's basically just a mixture of frequencies and basically a bit like rock, paper, scissors type of style in lots of those spots. It's, I think, more important to just be very sharp and just have a very good understanding of how to deviate and when to deviate, and but general a good understanding of a good equilibrium. And so there's definitely a few players that maybe have spent more time studying, but I think just generally being having a good game plan and being sharp, I think that's very, very helpful right now.
Well, I would imagine that is helpful, but I mean, yeah, you obviously guys all have solid fundamentals, so finding that additional edge that someone might not be pursuing probably is worth a ton, as you say. obviously for me hard to understand dynamics in 1 million buying games. So that's a
I
different world.
mean, it's actually not as different. Like the biggest factor actually that comes in is that people just play slightly more snug. Like they play slightly tighter, slightly more
Oh,
passive. Like
really? Okay.
yeah, definitely. You can. I mean, you can definitely see in a 15K compared to a 200K. Like I wouldn't say they're scared, but you know, let's say just very simple, right? If it's about blasting it off, or if it's about making a massive call, people are just slightly more leaning towards doing it when it's on the lowest end of your buying range, whether it's on the
Yeah.
highest end, where you maybe have the biggest piece, and you also like have, let's say if you sell action, you don't want to, you know, do something where like, oh, that might look stupid. So like there's definitely certain considerations that come into play when you play. Like for example, I felt that too when I played the $1 million buy-in. Like there's just certain things where I feel like, for example, if I would play a 25K or 50K 100% on my own, and there's a certain situation where I just feel like it's 100% play and I have a hand that's like a very, very clear fold, but I just think it's profitable. Like sometimes it's hard to do it in $1 million buy-in when you have, you know, maybe 15% of your own and 85% you sold. So it's like now you feel like, okay, you don't want to, let's say for some reason you're wrong and then you just like
Right.
dusted it off like that. So there are certain implications that change it.
That actually make a lot of sense. I just didn't thought about it. I thought you guys like just consider this as numbers and still try to do the most close to your decision. But it's not that easy to detach, I guess, fully.
I mean, there's a reason also because businessmen as well, right? Like if you always put up 100% of your own, it's very different, right? Like suddenly
That's
you play
true.
a 300K and you risk 300K, which is mostly quite a big buy-in for most businessmen. But then if you play 25K, you know, it might just be smaller for them. So like you play different. So there's definitely implications that matter in regards to the buy-in.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. But this mostly goes for live. I mean, you do mostly play live as well as you mentioned with like occasional online session.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts like in general, like future of this industry, like live versus online, let's say, like, and how the technology going to change that?
I mean, like I think online is a bit of a different beast because you like you face so many regulations, right? So I think if we look at online in terms of a fully just, let's say everyone could play at all times, you know, on one skin, I think online poker would be massive. But then
Yeah,
now you
that's
have
true.
these limitations, right? Like certain Asian countries or America, or fenced off regions, you know, like France, Spain. Like there's actually like if you go through it, like there's actually lots of countries where things are difficult. So that obviously restricts online to some degree, that there are certain regulations and limitations. Nevertheless, I think I think we are in a decent position, but I'm actually more excited about what could be in the future. Like if we're
For
looking at,
online?
yeah, I mean, if we're looking at, for example, the American market, I think something will happen in the next 5 to 10 years. And that
I think
could
people
be,
thinking like that for last 10 years as well. But I
yeah,
agree on you on
I
this
actually
though.
didn't like, I thought that there was basically close to a 0% chance as long as people are still being paid to not open it back up. But I think now is a very different situation. Like I think there's a few politicians that put it on their flags. Like there's much less lobbying against it, which I think is a very important factor. And now there's much more people incentivized for it. So I think now I actually think the next, like, you know, like if I would have to put it, I think in the next 5 to 7 years, I think we have a pretty good shot at seeing like a larger American market.
You mean more
And
states legalizing it?
more states legalized, and it probably not being state by state, but maybe, you know, more
Oh, that
states
would be huge.
combined.
Yeah.
And then when that happens, I think there could be like, maybe it's just going to be America only. The part around it being open, I'm not sure about if that is a realistic case, but I mean that would be amazing. But that is just speculation. Like, of course, I'm
Sure.
not deep in the trenches, but I feel my gut feeling on this from everything I've read is that there's a good chance, and I think that's a great outlook. That I feel it's kind of leaning towards more regulation, but I think that also kind of makes sense where like certain things shouldn't be happening. But
Sure,
I
I agree
hope
with
that
that.
it's going to be a better regulation. And then on the other hand, live poker, I mean, is well and alive, right? It's
Yeah, well, that
thriving.
one is
Like,
booming for sure.
but I
I'm
think that also kind of shows like it's like live poker is different in a way where basically everyone can participate, right? You're regionally restricted, but
yeah.
like every country can play, and I think that kind of shows like people are excited about poker and people want to play poker. And I think especially in Asian countries, I've been playing in quite some Asian countries. Man, the market is massive. People love poker. People love tournaments, and if we find a good way to grow that and to nourish that excitement and that passion, like the market is going to explode.
Okay, that's good news, I guess. Like I have the least insights I have, I guess, is in Asia market. But even if you took US or Europe, like every second tournament is like hitting all-time attendance records, prize pools, and everything. So it's clear that live poker as well, and that's even when you consider the fact that no one is traveling throughout the continents to play small events, and these small ones also generating records. It's pretty insane, like how much it's growing. But I'm wondering, is that going to mean that people from online will lean to live mostly? But I see you have a more optimistic approach to US market. I mean, which would be huge if more states regulate it and then have combined player pool. That would be massive benefit for the industry as a whole, I think. So let's hope that happens. Yeah. And hopefully in the near future. You also like that's I guess a good caveat to take here. You recently became like integrity ambassador for Gigi. Maybe you can share your thoughts, like what does it mean and what's your vision about it? Like anything behind the scenes that's happening there. Like really just interested to hear your take, because there's obviously a lot of challenges in this sport as well.
Yes, you said it. Yeah, so when I've been asked, it's mainly been around the idea, how can I support to just make sure that the ecosystem is thriving? And then I mean, I've been asking myself this question as well as how can I make sure that the online ecosystem is growing and is getting healthier and is getting more sustainable and is getting better. And I think there's some very clear challenges that we're facing, and I think there's a bridge necessary. I think there's a bridge necessary between players and poker sites or providers and organizers. And one thing that I've really come to realize in the last few years is that I think I mean, I basically see both sides, right? Like I'd say still much more insights into being a poker player and
Mhm.
the different variations of that, both now like having insights into hobby players, but also professional, semi-professionals, so a variety of that. But then also now having insights into a variety of different businesses, operators, and their point of view. And I think the main thing that I've got to understood better is that I think it is very important that players take more responsibility for the ecosystem, because I think the dynamic that's happening right now is that there's, I think, some type of entitlement around the job of a winning poker pro, that there's some privilege that has to exist, and that sites have some type of that they should make sure that their job is thriving. And I think that's an illusion. Like I think that in the end, the way I see poker is that it should be a healthy and thriving environment where the people that are losing money and the people that are winning money, where they both enjoy it, and I
Right,
think
so
that
that's an
comes with
important
certain
point.
things, right?
Yeah.
Like, but I think it's very easy as a winning player to just focus on your own bottom line. It's very easy to just say like, hey, I'm just here to make as much money as I can. And I think that's the pitfall where the absolute majority of poker players are stuck in, is that they just think like, I there has to be the dream of a winning player. There has to be, like pros need to exist, and like, you need to make X money, and now like they do this, and I think that I think you have to think in another way. I think you have to think like to take also the responsibility as a pro and really understand like, okay, what are the different factors, and what are the things that I add to this ecosystem, or my role as a pro in this ecosystem, and certain things that are happening. So if, for example, you're a heads-up player and your win rate, let's say you only play against recreationals and your win rate is 15 BB per 100, and the win rate of the recreational is minus 15 BB per 100, and then the site makes this much through rake, and then basically people like very often just lean back and are like, okay, I'm such a good player, like I earned this, like I earned this right to sit there and like win against this recreational. And it's just like, hey guys, you have to look beyond that. It's like the site invested money.
Yeah, where did you get these recreationals from, right?
Exactly. Where did this guy come from? Like, did you chat him up on like WhatsApp and say like, hey, let's or did the site invest into marketing and onboard this player, and like, so if you think about this and then think about, okay, you're making whatever, like 350,000 a year playing 10, 20, 25, 50 heads up online, and the site makes almost nothing of providing that environment to you. Is like maybe a clear net loss, actually, not making nothing, like a clear net loss on like the cost they have to obtain those players, to retain those players, to bring them back, to deposit fees they're paying, and so on. And then you look at that balance and they're like, hey, this business model is not working for us. And I think that's maybe too deep of a dive into one particular part of the
No, but
business,
that's actually a good point that people don't think about. Like, and obviously that's sort of an extreme example you're mentioning here, but PokerRoom's also not openly sharing like this process, and most people don't think about it, don't understand it, I guess, which like more information about the matter could help this a little bit, I guess. That takeaway.
It could help it, but I also don't really see poker sites with the responsibility to educate poker pros on like what their role is in the ecosystem. Like, I think certain efforts have been made, but I also, like, maybe to summarize what I want to say before in terms of my role, like what I see is this was an example for where I think that poker players have to take more responsibility, in my opinion, for their role in the ecosystem. And not because they have to, but more because I think it's for their own benefit. Nobody has to. No, everyone can do what they want. And I think if
Right.
they want the environment to thrive, and if they want to further their own career, then I think they should take these things into consideration, and also try to understand the business side of how this environment works. Because there's a lot behind that. There's a lot of costs behind that. There's a lot of there's actually and that's the thing that I think frustrates me as well. Is I mean, now I have lots of insights into GG poker, and there's a lot of effort and a lot of effort being put into growing poker, like a lot of effort, and
Which is not cheap, most likely.
And it's not cheap. It's hundreds of millions that are being poured into this, right? Like, it's really like, I mean, it's a lot of money that is being poured into growing the game, right? Like really growing markets, growing individual markets, onboarding players, presenting poker in the best possible way, like creating content around it, partnerships. Like, basically, they're thinking full horizontal integration into everything and growing poker as an entirety. And I think so my role there, I see, is I'm also looking at this and thinking, okay, like, where are the biggest inefficiencies, right? Like, where are the things where like this whole thing is like losing drive or losing money, or like there's too much cost at some point. And that's really like, my experience is really more on the poker side, like the actual game side. And one thing I've seen over the years is really that, I mean, there's quite some bad faith actors in poker, mostly to squeeze money out of the environment. And to summarize my role there, it's really about just making sure to make the environment as sustainable and healthy as possible. And one of the big ways is to plug these holes, right? Like, when there's organized groups ghosting or using.
No, yeah, that's clear examples, obviously.
That's a problem. So
Yeah.
and then let's say if they take 10 million out of the ecosystem a year, that's a lot of money. And that's money that's being taken both from good faith actors who just try to further the ecosystem, but it's also being taken from recreationals, and I think that's a big problem. So basically the essence of my role is to focus on RTA, ghosting, MDA, anything around collusion, just to make sure to improve the games and make them safer overall. And I work pretty closely with the security department to share my experience, to give my input on certain topics, and yeah,
so
try
that's
to make things better.
obviously sounds very good and well. I wonder how realistic is it to actually combat these? Because like there are so many ways to do it, like, and there's so much money involved that there's always going to be someone trying to cheat the way out of it. And
Yeah, I mean,
like
it's a step-by-step process. It's not something that happens in a day. It's also, I don't see this as like it's not a fruitless endeavor just because
Sure.
people will try to exploit it. I think it's the opposite. I think it's worthwhile to make it more difficult, because I see it a bit like this. If you look at it like a pyramid, or like a steep pyramid, generally the majority of players don't jump through a crazy amount of hoops to like build like an organized, a very, very heavily organized criminal organization.
Sure.
So
Let's
it's not
hope
that people
so.
sit down. Yeah, I mean that's really, but if it's very easy, right? If you're like, if someone is like, hey, just use this and make 50,000 more
Yeah.
a year, and you just have to click here, then so I think a lot of it is really just setting the threshold in a way
I like that.
where cheating becomes so difficult, or cheating and not being caught becomes so difficult. And if you cheat and are being caught, the punishment is severe enough that it deters enough. And that's, I think, an important step, where if you realize, okay, hey, wait a second. First of all, I think the first part, is communication. I think it has to be very clear what is not allowed. And there's certain things that are ambiguous. Certain things are difficult, like ghosting, right? It's like, are you not allowed to talk to a buddy like when he's there? Or are you not allowed to like, I think a lot of it is also communication and making clear what is not allowed. Like it's not okay if you're in a group of 200 people and then you have different tiers of people coming on a call and taking over your computer. That's not okay.
Yeah.
I personally think it's okay, if like you're a recreational player and like there's a buddy and like you're talking to, it's like, we're not, like, I think as long as it's clearly like not not
Not like
organized,
an organized
not
effort,
like,
yeah.
then I think a lot of these things that we can't enforce it. I would say like, hey, think about this, like maybe don't do this, be like thoughtful about it. But I think I'm personally really focused on these like very organized efforts, and I think that's it's really just about the highly criminal, in my opinion, criminal organizations that siphon money out of the ecosystem.
I actually love this take a lot. Like, obviously, having a goal to like remove all of the possible cheating just would be unrealistic. But if you make the threshold just hard enough and remove like even 90% of people who trying, and then make the risk so big that if you caught, you lose a lot, then the risk reward suddenly becomes is not that great, right? As you say, if it only just clicking a button and downloading some software and running it, it's one thing. But if you have to like a very sophisticated setup to do it, then there's not going to be that many people trying.
And I think also another part that's quite interesting about this is, I mean, also about my new role, is people focus on the things that don't work, right? Like
that's
say,
natural. I think that's like you're obviously putting a target on your back, at least to some degree here.
I'm getting since the day I took the position, I'm getting a lot of on Twitter. I just have to zone out certain
That's
things.
funny enough, though. Like for me, I do think you're probably one of the best persons to actually be in that role. So it's crazy how people always everything. So that's another thing. But
I think it's an interesting personal challenge as well, since basically it's kind of the position where everything I'm doing is, you know, gives an angle of like it being not okay, you know, whether it's like commenting something, commenting nothing, like addressing it in a certain way, like doing this, doing that. So I think it's a good challenge for myself as well to just really focusing on the task, just like sitting down, thinking about what, you know, the best use of the time is, and then focus on that, and then work
pretty
on
much
that.
like
So
playing, right? Concentrating on the decision
the
rather
highest
than
EV,
the
yeah.
noise. Yeah. Oh, I like that. So you really touch like two different sides of the coin. I definitely agree with what you said about the integrity part of the game, and I like your take on it. I also heard a very great saying, like, as a professional poker player, your job is to, like, you're pretty much selling experience to recreational players for their money, and they're paying money for the experience. So as you say, figuring out a way how to play a role in the industry is really interesting topic on as whole. I don't want to go into this too deep. Like, I mean, I can easily see how that can look in live games, like playing without hoodies, sunglasses, and actually talking with people and creating that normal environment. But can you summarize like what you have in mind saying in online poker, what that role is for that reg who is winning 50 big blinds per 100 hand? Like, what do you think is that we as a industry can do to help it out?
I mean, I think a really good start is to try to have good ethics. I mean, I think
What
really
is it?
I mean, as basic as it sounds, like I mean, I can go on like on every game, on every stakes, on every topic. There's about you know, a dozen things where, let's take cash game, right? I mean, you have to see also my position where I get so much communication coming in as well. And then what I do as well is look at individual cases, right? So people, like, I mean, you cannot believe how many people are texting me like, hey, I have this issue, can you help me? And then I look into a lot
So
of
now you're a
things, and then
support agent as well. That's nice.
yeah, I mean, I try also to not like do the job, because I think there's certain organizational rules as well, and if it's a security topic, like security should handle it, you know. And if it's, because very often the one thing I've learned, this is maybe also interesting for listeners, the one thing I've learned is there's always more to it. You know, if someone comes to me and is like, hey, you know, this and this happened, and then I go to the other department and ask them like, what is this case about? And I read like the information or the documentation, and I'm like, you know, the guy left out 35%, or he
I
didn't.
imagine.
It's really, I think some people don't do it intentionally, but of course they try to further their own cause as well, right? Like they think, oh, they've been unfairly treated, and like there's this thing and there's that thing. But one experience I've made is, I would say the absolute vast majority has not been unfairly treated, in my opinion.
Yeah,
I
well, I
think
agree.
that, yeah, I mean, that's also an important learning, right? Because then it's like, let's say it's acquaintances or it's friends that come to me. It's mostly acquaintances, and they're like, hey, Fedor, can you help me with this issue? I try to look into it, and the absolute vast majority, I'm on the side of the decision that has been made. There are some cases where I actually have a more nuanced opinion, and like I would, you know, try to give my opinion on it, or like try to adjust it in a certain way, or like maybe I thought, you know, it was slightly too harsh. But it's never been like, oh, they just, you know, like it was just this absolute crazy mistake that they made. Like that's relieving on the one side, but also on the player side is like, you know, people maybe
But that's not surprising, I think. Like everyone takes their own personal situation, not without a personal lens, I guess.
yeah,
So
not
yeah.
I think if you ask poker players, that they think the quota is much lower. Like I think that I just wanted to say that I think the quota,
Okay.
like the way the decisions are being made, I actually think, like looking deeper into it, I feel like there's not an unfair bias towards like mistreating poker players. Just want to say that that from the cases I looked into. But so I think a really big part is when I look deeper into that, there are a lot of things that I think go into making sure that you play your role, let's say it like this, right? And it's very it's very interesting how many people cross lines and then complain. So seating scripts, let's just say one thing, right? Like seating scripts are being developed and then they're being used, and it's like there is very little drive to like where people are just like, no, like, no, let's not use them, and let's like, and then suddenly you create this environment where like kind of, they were allowed on PokerStars because they couldn't enforce it, so they didn't want to like not allow something that couldn't be enforced, and so on. But like, I think there's this one very clear thing where like, I think it's just very clearly bad for the game that there's certain players that just like, they never play any regular game and then they suddenly seat script like to the left of a recreational like that. And that's a thing that was a big thing for like years and years. And there's a list along those things that is very long with like lots of different small things where I think now you can say, okay, it's the responsibility of the site, and you can just say like, oh, they're not doing their job properly to like do this, do that. Or, players can also organize more and present certain things and just like say, hey, we because on high stakes, it's basically groups of people anyway who communicate in some way, they know each other and so on. Like make suggestions to improve the ecology, to improve the things, both for you, like removing bad faith actors, like making like proper suggestions for solutions. Where
And I guess it's beneficial in the long run for everyone, actually. Like,
yes, heavily, and I think it's also then a bit like, then there's this in between where then people just like kind of say like, then you get 100 messages of like, this guy's seat scripting and this guy's seat scripting and this guy's seat scripting, and then we're at that point where it's like we look into certain people and certain people are not, and then it's kind of again not really finding solution. I think it's very important for like, let's say if we look at stables as well, right? Like if people would have higher ethics, higher standards in that regard, it would be very like, people would just be called out, right? People would just like, hey, this is not okay, like ghosting is not okay. And then yet there's like hundreds and hundreds of players and stables where ghosting is very normal, and then suddenly like it's just being normalized. And I think if that happens, you don't have to build system, like, you know how difficult it is to build like technical product that finds out that someone is being ghosted. That is like a very, very challenging task. Like finding proof that someone is being ghosted is very difficult.
Right, because you can't ban just people from suspicious, right? You actually need to know and be able to pinpoint it.
So now, if we compare, and that's a much better example. If we compare those two things, where now, let's say I would have the challenge to build like a technical product that identifies if someone is being ghosted or not, versus people just having higher moral standards and saying like, calling other people out as well, and being like, hey, this is not okay, like don't do that. This is very like, it's very difficult. This is very difficult, and this is actually quite easy. It's just like, hey, these people are doing that. Like,
I mean, it's probably like the second option is also not that easy. It sounds easy in theory, but what it would mean actually that you need to kind of say that about your friend, and these stable groups are probably very close. And
oftentimes it's not really like that. I mean, it's oftentimes like, it's like 300-400 people, very organized, different tiers of player. I mean, it's not, that's also the thing. It's not like everything is like this, right? It's not like, I mean, the vast majority of the poker, it's just fine, but it's like small subgroups where it's like just,
but that's causing small groups causing a lot of harm for the industry.
Correct. And that's mainly the thing where it's like, I think we are in this intersection right now where like, over the last few years, the organizations have just become significantly more professional, and it's a very challenging task in the particular game we're looking at, where like, if you look at chess, it's much easier to figure out, but if you look at poker, it's very difficult technically to figure it out. And so it would be kind of, the equivalent would be kind of like if you take like a very good chess player, and then you get like, he's being ghosted via video call by like a even better chess player, would also be extremely difficult to be caught.
Right.
But
if you're a weak player and then suddenly become a top pro, then it's not that hard. But
that is quite easy in chess, and that's still quite difficult in poker.
Right.
So if you have like, and this challenge, like that's just something that costs the ecosystem a lot of money and something that we want to fix. But I think it's also it's very important to encourage people to just not do that. Like
I agree.
it sounds simple, but it's a very, very important part. Because I don't want to, I don't want to get into like, I would prefer if we don't have to do it by like, okay, there's better detection, there's more punishment, and then because there's more punishment, people stop. Like, I think it would be much better if we would just collectively, like, if there's more drive, just be like, hey guys, it's a nicer balance if we don't race to like, people have to play unfair to be winning because people who are playing unfair take too, like,
Yeah.
that's not, because there is a lot of social pressure, right? If you say like, hey, these guys are behaving in an unfair way, there is quite some social pressure. It's not like you want to be in poker and want to be known as like you
I
won
agree.
money by like playing unfair. It's just so yeah, this is a long topic, it's a big topic, but
yeah, we probably can talk about this alone for quite a while, but it seems that online poker is really have a lot of challenges to solve. And yeah, wondering if this light of things, do you think it's realistic to go like from 0 to hero in online poker in 24, or like that is already very hard thing to do?
I mean, my answer is like 100%. It's not like I think it's actually not that difficult to be winning in poker, I think.
Really?
I think
Okay,
it is,
that's interesting.
I think if you don't think about any of those things, if you're just like, I don't care about, I just, sit down and play, from like always the same days, same time, like I don't care about what's going on around me, it's quite difficult. But if you take that into consideration, if you understand certain dynamics, if you think about game selection, if you like, if you're dedicated and if you put your, your head down, like, yeah, poker is still clearly beatable. But of course it gets more difficult, and the better the games, the easier it is, and the worse the games, the harder it is. But
That's kind of
I see
makes
a
sense.
rather bright, like, I think from what I've seen, the passion for poker is very high, maybe higher than it used to be. And I think that's the only thing that matters. I think there's a lot of people who are excited about poker, and I think that's awesome.
If you can keep that excitement, I guess. So that's also important point. So like, what would you say would be advice for someone just starting? Like, what anything like a quick takeaway, what to concentrate on, or how to approach it?
I mean, find something that works, I think is it's a good start. Just focus on something and
What do you mean by that? Like, it's
yeah, just kind of find a bit of a niche that's working. Like I started out, like I was definitely jumping around too much, but just like, whether you prefer tournaments or cash game, just like find something that you focus on, and then just like, let's say, for cash game, if you play whatever 5 cent, 10 cents, and just like focus on that and try to become a winning player in that particular game. And then from there on out in cash game, I think it's rather straightforward. You just have to like work your way up, basically.
yeah, I like that. I actually was jumping
tournaments,
as
it's the
well
same.
for everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think in tournaments it's also quite easy. You just play, average buy-in $10, $15, $20 or whatever, and you just like try to. I think it's rather straightforward to become a winner in those games.
I actually think like low stakes entities are probably the easiest one to beat at this point.
Yeah, probably. I mean, quite a nice selection too. Lots of money also being like, again, like GG running great promotions, big prize pools. Like, I think there's great tournaments to pick from. So like, if you're, I mean, I think especially from a tournament perspective, if you play, $50 average buy, like if you work your way up from like whatever $10 to $50 average buy, it's like you have so many options. There's so many great tournaments running. Like live poker is incredible. For like 1Ks and 500s and 1500s and whatever.
Yeah,
Like
live poker
that
is
is
pretty
probably
great.
the sweet spot. Like where it's just very fun to play poker.
I mean, for live poker is a bit complicated because like you can't travel somewhere to play 500 buy-in event.
It depends where you live. Like,
Well, yeah, I mean,
mostly,
it's next to you, yeah, but like you're
yeah,
not
but
going to
mostly
another
you have
country.
something next to you. Like
Yeah,
most
that's true. That's true.
players, like let's say you live in Vienna, you have like so many options. Like you have King's Casino, you can go to Bratislava, you can go to Liechtenstein, you can go to Italy. It's like you can play the EPT, the early stuff, like the Eureka stuff. You can fly to like this basically like a €150 flight away. Like there's a ton of live stuff. And optimally, it's like some type of festival, right? Like something where there's like
Yeah,
Irish poker
usually
open.
not one event running, right?
So there's lots of stuff, and I think also, right, if you live in America, I mean, there's like even better. There's tons of stuff. You can go play WSOP in South America. There's some great stuff. Like, I mean, the only would probably be like, I don't know, if you're in Africa, it might be difficult, but
Okay.
even in Asia, you have some incredible tournament, like unbelievable. Like let's say you live in Korea, you have some incredible tournaments running there. Yeah. So
Okay, so like that, I like being able to think that it's very much beatable at this point.
yeah, for sure.
Let's touch the PokerCode topic, I guess, a little bit. Obviously, not surprised you have your own training side. So then you might be a bit biased saying that training side is the best way to learn. But actually, I'm the guy who had hired poker coaches when I was playing throughout all of the steps when I progressed. And I do think it's extremely efficient to have someone by your side. And for me, PokerCode is actually quite incredible site. It started very small, but right now you've grown into like all encompassing platform. And I guess, can you share your journey about that? How you decided to do to even start creating the content and what it grew into?
Sure. First, I want to break a bit of this myth that we are this like highly professionalized, like training people.
What
I
do you
would
mean?
actually say, yeah, I mean, I've heard this a few times now that like I'm running a stable, or like that, there's like recruits like for PokerCode, and like, I mean, basically at this point, the absolute majority of our students, or like subscribers, is maybe even members is the best word, is semi-recreational players. It's mostly actually designed towards players who are just ambitious about the game. Like I generally say, if you're like, let's say 0 to 10, 0 is like knowing nothing, and 10 is like being, the best in the world. Like a lot of our players are like a 3, 4, 5, 6, I would say.
Okay.
So ambitious, aspiring, maybe, let's say they have a job and then they play poker, they love to play poker in their free time, or they're maybe, like trying to play full time, or like, so a lot of them, the connecting thing, I think, is the passion and the ambition, but like we don't have tons of professionals on our side actually. So that's as to the product. And in terms of what it does, I mean, I'm very, very proud of it now, because I think what we have accomplished is that it's just quite holistic, in the sense of you can do lots of different things with it. Like if I give it to someone now and he's kind of, he's on a 3 and he's like, okay, I'm a 3 right now, but I want to become a 5. Then there's lots of different angles you can take, where the main thing obviously centers around videos, but then we have lots of quizzes, and like there's different paths, like learning paths you can take, and there's a Discord where that's structured as well. So it's really more around just kind of, especially let's say you have a job and you just want to dip into, like getting some good, like
To learn like
mental
fundamentals,
inputs,
but being able to do that in like a bit more structured way. Because like,
yeah, and getting impulses. I think often it's about just like kind of, you just want to get something that you're it's like, this is interesting, and then you get into it, and then I know this as well, when you like start watching a video, then you're like, you get excited, and then you want to apply this, and then you want to play. So I mean, in the end, it's really more, we try to just take quite high level quality content and then distill this into something that's exciting for people to indulge, whether it's like doing some content session with a quiz where they can compete against each other, or just like breaking down a theoretical concept, or reviewing a final table that we just played, like just generally taking things that are probably interesting to them then sharing that with them, and then there's discussion. There's people who now live together, like people who have built their own groups or study together and so on. So it's more like kind of a mix of a strong community. Like we actually organize an event in Vienna right now, really more around socializing. So like bowling and a go-kart and
Oh, that's fun.
yeah, I'm excited. And actually lots of people are coming. And I think that kind of shows like there's just people are there because
It's
they
like
really
an
enjoy.
open event that everyone can come from PokerCode.
Yeah, exactly.
Wow, that's
So
crazy.
I think it's gonna be way overbooked. So yeah.
I could imagine. But like, I actually saw obviously quite a few of your videos, and I also liked it's a different one. It's not like a someone's sitting like we are right now and randomly talking. It's like sort of almost Netflix like videos of you
Yeah.
make. So I guess that also talks to the part that you mentioned, making it engaging and catching that attention, which you guys did a great job.
Thanks.
But what I would say what struck me the most is the community was able to build. I just checked your Discord channel before our call. Man, it's like 11,000 people. Like how that's even possible? Like it's really crazy in this really sort of small niche. If you put it like poker training is not a very popular thing. I can say that because I know what people read from on our side as well. But you spoke very publicly about like community being very important for you in the early stages. I mean, maybe you can share your thoughts about like how to build that like-minded people around you that they could help, because I guess that can speed up the learning process quite a bit.
Yeah, I think there's no real like cheat code for it. One thing that I really like, maybe a lot of people will say this about them, but one thing I'm really loving about our community is when we hosted our first PokerCode festival, or like now our event in Madrid, I think there were maybe 300 of us, or 250, 300 members or something. And it was such a good crowd. Like, just very nice people, just very, like it was a weird tournament as well because it was just a very, very nice, there was nobody out of line. Like it was just very like people had very nice conversations. You could see that like the vibe was just really, it was
Okay, you
maybe,
sold it. I'm coming to the next one. Where is
yeah,
it?
it was almost a bit weird, because it felt like a little, like it felt just like very, very much like a sporting event, basically, like just people being very like, it was just a good, very good energy, like nothing, too forced. And I think that's also nice if you have a lot of people who like take it serious, but it's not, it's not make it or break it. They don't show up with like their last 500 euros, or
Right.
they're not, it's not
Hopefully,
gambling. Like it didn't
hopefully.
feel like gambling. It just felt like they're there. Like it's kind of a social event. You're just having a good time. And like, that was something I found really, was very, very nice to see that I think it's kind of also what we put out. That's kind of what's coming back, right? Like we never went out like telling people like, hey, subscribe and you make millions. Like I show you how to, it was
Yeah.
more like, hey,
First poker 10 days.
yeah, if you're passionate, like come and we try to share as much as we can, and if not, like it's fine too.
Yeah, and I like it. Yeah, I agree. Like the having the community is huge. Like when I was playing poker, that helped me tremendously. But when I moved from poker, I kind of failed to build it around me. In the business world, let's say. So you obviously have a ton of experience in this. I really wanted to hear your take. Like, so moving away from poker, like how that can help you. Let's take business as an example. You have multiple investments and businesses that you run. Like, how important is building communities around that, and like even more so, how to do that.
Yeah, I mean, I would say I was generally not very good running businesses the first years. I think I think my downfall is a bit that I overestimated myself, and I think I'm at a point now where I I learned enough things, and I think I humbled as well, which I think was a very important process for me to get to a level where now I can use my strengths and like I can bring in the things that I'm good at as well. And in the beginning I was just overwhelmed. There was just too much stuff, and too many things that I didn't know, and and just like when you come into something and everything is new and you know nothing, right? It's like whether it's PR or marketing or community building or tech or product, like you just like fundraise, like whatever it is, you just look at it and you're like, where do I start? How do I do this? It's just it can be very overwhelming when all of these things are required. In terms of community building, I've had this topic in a variety of different ways now, and I think one of the pitfalls that I see over and over again is people thinking they have to build community.
Really? Okay.
The moment
I'm thinking about that right now for sure.
Yeah, the moment you think you have to do that, generally it's
okay.
like people
Why is
hire
that?
because there is no real like community doesn't, you can't force it.
Yeah, I guess
you can never force it. It's really always like, think about the things, like don't even talk about community as community, like think about the things that you mean when you say that.
Yeah.
You know, do you want to host events? Do you want to like chat with people? Do you want to give them advice somewhere? Like, do you want to, because that's in the end, right? Like, we're like, okay, now we have to make people chat. Like, that's just a silly, like, once you have to force people to like do something, you know, like, let's think of like things to, I think that we still sometimes, you're like, oh, how can we make, like, I think you shouldn't think about making people do anything. Like, just have something in mind that you actually, you know, that you want to do or that you think provides value, or like, and then do that, and then people respond to it or people don't respond to it. And if people respond to it, you have figured it out, and then you try. And if people don't respond, then you haven't figured it out yet. But I think the driver has to be that you want to do that, or like that's a thing that organically makes sense. Like if you're very excited about a certain topic and you're like, hey, I just want to share this thing, and then you start sharing that, and then people get attracted by you sharing that, then that's how you build community. Or if you like, hey,
yeah,
I just
agree.
you know really like organizing these events, then like you start organizing these events, you see what works well, what doesn't, people give you feedback, you develop. Like I think that's in essence, that's it. Like it doesn't require more. So for us it was really more, I don't think we have like I think, for example, that our community really is mostly consisting of the extra curriculum, by the way. Like, I don't think it's this, like, just put people in the chat and, like, just hands off and wait. Like, the chat exists, right? Our Discord exists, and there's certain things that it's quite nice for. Like, we do our coachings on Discord, and we communicate in a certain way on Discord. But I see it more as, like, the stuff where really the magic happens for me is when people meet, is, like, when they go to events together, when we organize event, like, that's really when they come back and then they chat with the people that they have just met, right? So then chatting is more like, hey, you know, oh, this was awesome. We did this, we did that, we talked about this, you follow up. But like, just, I mean,
no, I understand your point though. You like not something you can force, probably, as you say. Yeah, you can't just lock people in the chat and say go and chat about it. Yeah, someone.
Yeah, but
they
a lot of
need to
people
do
who want to build community try to do exactly that, and they fail
okay.
always. They hire a community manager and then think that like
right. No, I understand that point. Like for me, it looks so easy to do in poker because like the incentives are clear and like the path of learning together is also clear. But as you said in your example of business, when you jump into it, you need to do this, this, and this, and this, and this, and you don't know any of this. So you still need to learn somehow. And then having someone to help would be extremely valuable. But it's not that easy to build like these different communities around it, because it's not like taking your example in poker that you can offer a lot of value. Like even your coaching is hugely valuable, right? Like if I'm starting a business from scratch, like how I can get these valuable people to help me out and build community around that. That's not like that easy idea.
no, not easy.
Yeah, but might be worth it if you generally, as you say, excited about the topic.
I mean, I think if you start something like that, then you probably don't really get people who are much better than you.
Yeah, that's true.
But that's also okay. Like, just find promising people and invite them to collaborate. Like that's how I did it in poker, right? Like I had different ways of communicating. Like with better people, I was very careful with their time. I was like, I prepped it, like I put in some analysis, like I was like, hey, here's a hand, like these are my thoughts, what do you think about it? And then they type back like a 2-liner or whatever. But with peers, this is basically people that are above me and I want to learn from
Yeah.
them. So I put in effort, like I basically like, hey, can you give me advice on this?
Oh, I
Often they
like
give
that. Yeah.
advice. I would say 70-80% they give advice. But then with peers, you're more like, you have one Skype group, you chat, you call every day, you're like just chatting around, like you're just like, hey, you drop a hand sometimes, just like, what do you think? Like there's no, so I think it's also kind of, it's not really a hierarchy, but it's like a flow of information, right? Like some people you just like
Yeah,
get
that makes a lot of sense.
95% of the time from. So like you have to make sure that the relationship, makes sense as well. And what you can do is show respect for what they're giving, right? Like just be very respectful, and then people are happy to provide. And with peers, I think it's different. So if it's in business, then I would just say like, invite people where you think like incentives are 100% aligned and where you see potential. That's what I did in poker. Is I just started working with like the 10 highest, potentials I saw, and things worked out extremely well.
Nice. It's a good thing to think through a little. But I really love the idea of being more prepared with the people you want to get some sort of insights, right? Because like they don't have too much time to waste in the most cases. So no have incentive to do that, I guess. But yeah, that's interesting.
Lots of people are willing to help for nothing.
Yeah, I agree.
It's like
And I
if
was lucky
someone,
enough to meet amazing people on the way who helped me a lot when I was playing and when I was not playing as well. So yeah, people are generally actually happy to help, I guess. But still, you need to show something for it and be at least prepared, as you say, rather than say, "Hey, what you can do to me," which
send
sounds
me
fun.
money.
Yeah, yeah. Can you send me a couple of bitcoins, man? That's what. Is like any particular project you are passionate at right now, or working behind the scenes that you can share? I know you have like
Nothing like, I mean, right now, nothing too operational I'm working on. I have enough on my plate right now between PokerCode, which I'm actually transitioning out of the operational side right now. So I have a really good guy who's managing the majority right now, and that's very nice. And I think it's working very well too, which is great to see that it's
yeah, happy to
fundamentally
hear that.
strong enough.
Sometimes these
Yeah,
transitions
it's
are not
great.
that easy, though, I guess.
Yeah, it's like, I mean, it makes sense too. It's a good fit, and he's with the company for a long time, so makes
Yeah,
sense.
that's nice. I also want to ask you about like when you moved from playing full-time poker to doing other things. Um, there's a huge difference in how the operations and everything looks. And when you decided to like, yeah, you use the word retiring on poker, which was kind of misleading, I guess. But did you know what you're going to do next, or was it like, yeah, I just don't want to play full time, and I'm going to figure out next what I'm going to do after?
Yeah, I was very burned out.
Hmm.
End of summer 2016, so mid-July, I was very burnt out. I got home, I was drained. I think I would actually say it lasted probably 2 or 3 weeks, like very like antisocial, like didn't want to talk to anyone, just stayed at home. I was very drained, very exhausted. And I think in that the reflection process set in, that I came to the conclusion that I want to stop playing poker for the near future. I didn't play for a month or two, and then I realized after that, like, I'm not missing it right now the way I used to miss it. I did take some breaks before, and then I always came back and was like, oh my God, let me play poker. And now I took a break for 1 or 2 months and didn't miss it. And then I worked at a trading company in Chicago for a month, and then even after that I didn't miss it. And then it kind of became clear to me that I want to start my own business, and then I did that and focused on that. And during that time, I played basically almost no poker.
Okay, that's nice. Did you mention you work for a trading company? I didn't get that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's nice. Didn't know it. That's an interesting
Some things
topic
you
on
don't
its
know.
own. Yeah, man. I guess let's not dive into this one because I would have quite a few questions. But so a better one maybe to follow that would be like, how do you find that passion? Like you said, you decide to go into business, so you still need to like know then what you want to do. If you know that you don't want to play poker full time, how to know what you want to do then?
Yeah. I I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I think the idea was really more the idea of building an organization in some way that functions around my ideals, like where there's a very high level, like basically how I ran my own poker operation, right? My career, where it's just functioning on a very high level with a lot of independence and and a strong collaborative sense. And I think my idea was more, I want to do that in some other area. I want to build a business that functions around those principles. And I think that when I started diving into other projects, I felt like it's not topic wise, it's interesting, but principle wise, I feel like I kind of want to do my own thing. And that was the start, was more like I just want to try it, I just want to try to build my own organization and see if I can build it along the principles that or along my values, along the lines of my ideals as well. And that was significantly more difficult than I anticipated.
Okay. Well, that's kind of good to know that you're also a human being, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, very much so.
So what was like the biggest challenge in that transition period for you on the building that business where you wanted to build and the way you see it?
I mean, opening way too many boxes and not really knowing what to do in them.
Doing too many things at the same time, you mean? Or?
Too many things at the same time, too high level of complexity, too little experience in investing, too little experience in like basically anything.
But you need to get that experience somehow, I guess. Like
You need to get that experience, but I think it's also a bit, right? Like I wouldn't say it was necessarily a very bad path. It was starting out on a path that had basically zero chance and setting myself up decently for the future. But I think
what do you mean zero chance?
like, I mean, the way I started out was just so, like, basically kind of not, not meant to fail, but I think there was almost no chance to succeed in the way of just doing like basically starting out way too much, that even if it grows, it basically always gets to a point where it gets very hard to handle. Like there's obviously scenarios where things work out and
Right.
and you grow into the role and what I mean, lots of startups have managed, right? Whereas like people are inexperienced and then some things work out, or like you hit certain things that work very well and then you grow into that. Like that would have been obviously possible, but the way I started out was just pretty doing way too many things at the same time. We invested in different businesses, we built different businesses, we had different businesses to build basically at the same time, and it was just I think not a very smart idea to
I mean, it's hard enough to
start
build
with.
one solid business,
Correct.
right? So what would you do differently at this point?
Just more simple. Like if I would do it differently, I would probably just go to something that I consider very successful. Not successful, very interesting, intriguing, like fitting. Just go into a company and just like work there, spend some time there with the clear idea that I'm not going to stay there forever, but just like see how a very like currently high functioning operation works and like learn the operational side of things, just learn how it functions, learn
Sort of
what's
first-hand
difficult.
experience.
Exactly, and just kind of see, okay, they have experience, how does that experience distill into action? And then once I've seen more, it's also much easier to reproduce and like to fine tune. And rather than building things from scratch where like obviously you will make some very obvious mistakes because you haven't done it before. So it just costs, it's just a lot of opportunity costs to come up with things on your own. But I think that's also a bit my character. Just I value independence almost above anything. So I think I just kind of wanted to do things on my own, and that's what
Funny
I would
when you
do
say
different
that.
now. But it is what it is, and I took the path I took, and now I I think it helped me a lot. I learned a lot. I lost more money in those ventures than I would have to, I think. But I think it was kind of, I see it a bit as an investment in my future
If you learn
growth.
from those mistakes, right? Like that's not wasted money to some degree at
Yeah,
least.
not wasted at all. Just
Right. Maybe depends on how much you waste on the process. So with all of that going on, man, like how your day-to-day actually looks right now, like what Fedor does.
yeah, pretty chill. I mean, obviously traveling and Vienna days are very different. So I probably have 3 months of traveling where the days look very different. But if I'm in Vienna, they're mostly like I have maybe on average a call a day that is around a variety of different business topics, ranging from investments to PokerCode to other things. And then yeah, quite some work in just communication right now, just communicating with different people, whether it's my GG role or just other things I'm involved. It's just talking a lot to people right now, and then my girlfriend, spending time with my girlfriend, like doing some sports. I feel like days fill, it's just stuff is
You wake
happening.
up and
But
suddenly you have to go to sleep.
yeah, not like that. It doesn't feel rushed, but it's just there's always stuff, there's always something going on, and if there's nothing going on, then I'm also happy about that. So it's a good
Oh, that's a nice
it's a
position
good
to
day
be
right now.
in, not being forced to rush into things and actually.
No, not at all right now, not at all.
Yeah, that's nice. Okay, man, thanks a lot for amazing conversation. I guess we can wrap this with some fire questions if you're up for it.
Sure.
Just going to shoot you a couple quick ones. I guess let's open with my favorite one. What is your favorite book? Here you go, caught you on guard, off guard
The
here.
Art of Learning.
The Art of Learning. Okay, I read that one actually. So yeah, that's a nice. Funny enough, you are the second person from a few of these conversations who mentioned that one. So anyone listening, definitely give it a go. And I just asked you about the day. Wanted to ask what is the best way to relax after a hard day. Seems you don't have many of those, but still shoot your answer.
I mean, a massage is just really, really nice.
Right, I will take that as well. And what is the hardest opponent you have ever played in your life?
Poker wise?
Yeah.
Um, Personally, one of my favorite players is Mikita Badjakowski, so I'll just pick him.
Okay. I would have to believe he's pretty tough opponent for sure.
I really like how he plays.
Let's wrap this, I guess, with the last one. What was the best advice you have ever gotten from anyone?
Nothing comes to mind, actually. I mean, there's obviously along the
No
way
one gave you good advice on the way.
No, there's lots of people who gave me great advice, but I
Of
think
course, I'm joking.
often I think advice is like very situational, right? It's like this one, you're in this situation. I actually think I have a pretty bad memory in terms of things that, I some people just remember basically everything that happened in their life. Like for me, it's a bit more of a blur where certain weird things stand out, but then like some other things I forget quite quickly.
Funny enough, the same thing is for me. Like I do tend to forget something that my wife will get pretty mad at me at some point.
The date you're married.
Yep. Well,
Her
haven't forgot
birthday.
that date until now, but let's see if that happens in the future.
Yeah.
But yeah, I agree. Some things just get carried away, I guess, in the memory. Fun enough, I just talked with my friend about this yesterday. I do remember one specific moment from my life when I was 2 years old, and no one believes me, but I literally remember it. And I sometimes don't remember what we talked was another one last month. So that's funny.
Yeah.
Let's leave this one open, I guess.
Yeah. Maybe
Okay,
next time.
Yeah. Okay. So for that, let's jump on another conversation sometime in the future.
Sure.
And you can think about this one in advance then. Thanks, man. So appreciate it again. Was really a pleasure to chat. And yeah, let's wrap it. Have a great day, man.
You too, Tavis.
Cheers.